Davey La.
Hello, mate. We're in an RS3 kind of mood.
We are.
Stroke TTRS.
TTRS. So don't go anywhere until you've watched this video. We get a lot of inquiries because you build a lot of these. So this is the Daza. Biggity bop. Broken Daza. New bits to build Daza. We get a lot of people ring us about these, and like anything, buy wrong and it hurts. So they're a really popular car. They're easy to tune. They're easy to make fast. They're essentially half a V10 engine when you kind of look at the heads, and you've seen V10 heads with us anyway. Geometry wise, they're kind of half a V10, but they get, when they go wrong big. And they've normally gone wrong. They're not mechanically weak. There's some things you've got to take into account. It's normally they're pushed too hard for the setup, or poor maintenance, or things like injectors fail. So if you buy an RS3, especially the old especially the old like SEPA engines, the iron blocks, and it's leggy and it's got some miles in it, do yourself a favour, go and buy some injectors, genuine ones. Don't buy the ones off eBay that are copies that break after 20 minutes. These wipe engines out. No bullshit. That is what happened to this one. That's why it's melted a valve and it's done what it's done. You know, you can sit here and sort of say tune it, but we see so many where injectors have failed and wiped engines out. So I would say if you're going to buy one, throw the injectors away, get brand new injectors. Obviously on the very, very early ones, get carbon clean done, get a compression test done, and just make sure you're buying a good, strong engine. Because when we start getting to this level where they're tuned and you know, they're running stage 2, people are using octane boosters, they're using this mix, that mix. Tuners start getting involved, some are better than others. You know, you start getting problems and they start getting out of control quick. So again, I don't have the injectors of this. I would hazard a guess that it's probably an injector that's caused the majority of this damage, but essentially it ended up breaking the tip of the plug off, melting the tip, doing some damage. It would have clipped the valve on the way out, and then it's melted the head. But again, little things like that. Like, what do you notice about the back of that head? So
there it is.
Do you know what I mean? So it's had a turbo on it that's not been sealing right, so that doesn't help. So then you've got a lean environment as well, because reversion means it'll be sucking whatever can get out can get in.
Yep.
So you've got that. So the biggest thing with these is rods and valve train. So rods, you've got to start thinking, I'd start to get uncomfortable at 550, 600 horsepower. Now that is a blanket statement, because what you make at 7,000 RPM is not where a rod bends. Where a rod bends is peak cylinder pressure, which is mid-range. So your tuner needs to be watching what the torque's doing mid-range. And they bend rods. We did have a bent rod, didn't we?
Got many bent rods.
Yeah, I'm bent. So you've got to take that into account. So obviously we have got these pistons or roddings. So for this build, we've got uprated rods. Nope, they're pistons. I have a box. I'm sure it said rod on the side. Open that box up, and there they are. I've got a beautiful Turkish assistant.
Yeah, something like that.
You excited to get your t-shirt?
Yeah, it'd be cool.
We're on
T-shirt?
track
What's
days.
this?
Someone sending me a t-shirt.
Really?
Yeah. Sent me a message. I will tell you what it says. It says...
The power of YouTube, eh, mate?
Yeah. Getting free clothing now, it's great.
I know. Who sent it to me? Oh, where is it? When you look in, you can never find it.
It's all right.
James Masters. Hello, mate. I bought Matt a t-shirt. I know it's in a Greek font, but the Turkish font looked wank. I'll send it down to your shop over the next couple of days. And it says, chili sauce, salad, everything.
Yes.
It's catching on.
Dude.
I'm a trendsetter, mate.
You're the trend.
Yeah, I'm a trendsetter.
I'm the trend.
No, you're just the subject of my trend setting. I'm making you an
Famous.
influencer.
An influencer. Cool. I'm going to change my job title now. Social media influencer. I've had enough mechanics. That's it.
Mechanics.
The mechanics he's done.
I'm no longer mechanics in.
No longer doing that. I'm YouTubing.
So you ain't bending that bad boy. So ARP bolts.
I bet you I can.
Go on then, try and bend it.
Not like that.
Right.
Not like world's strongest man bending a
No.
frying pan type thing.
Oh, like the Eddie Hall face-off with Matey over. What's his name? Thor?
Yeah,
Bjorn?
but he's fighting another ex-world strongest man now.
Is he? Well, Eddie Hall's face-off was about the half-ton deadlift, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because his dad set up. The other guy had his dad set it up, didn't he?
Yeah, well, we don't.
It wasn't a proper.
No.
Yeah.
We need to reach out to Eddie just on another note.
What, to see if he can bend that rod?
That would be quite cool.
He probably just go.
Oh, wow.
I reckon his lad. I reckon his lad could bend it. You see how strong he is.
Oh, Max is super strong.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. He's like,
You ain't bullying that kid, are you?
I don't know.
Honestly.
he's like 5'10" already.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
He's benching like.
It's ridiculous. I thought it was 100 kilos.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Stronger than me.
Yeah, well, he's only 11.
Oh. I was going to say. 100 kg, that's not a lot. Oh.
It is when you're 11. I can't bench that now when I'm X times 11.
You're slightly over 11.
Yeah. So the first things you got to watch out for when you start tuning them is roddings, because you can bend them.
Yep.
And we've seen quite a few bend stock rods. So you just got to be really careful who you choose to do your tuning, and what level you're going for, and then obviously what fuel you're using and that kind of thing. So that's one thing.
Well, if we roll it back, so the first top tip with this is injectors.
Injectors. So if you go and buy an engine, you're not sure the history, stock, tuned or indifferent, my advice would be get the engine health check done before you buy it, like what we do when we sort of do PPIs on V10s or McLarens, that sort of thing. And I would say put a set of injectors in it if it's done a decent amount of miles.
Even though that's a significant outlay, you're going to save your arse in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, even if you go and get it tested and they all come back as okay, they fail. And you can't say that they fail at this mileage or that mileage.
Yep.
It's the reason why we kind of say the same thing, you know. I don't know why we don't see it on V10s more. We don't see really, until they're turboed.
Yeah.
It's just almost like they don't like, I don't know what it is, until it's almost like they don't like when they start having big boosts through them.
Yeah. Maybe a cylinder pressure or something messing with them.
Because we never see issues on V10s. We never see injector problems on V10s on injectors, and then the second we start turboing them, we can see issues. So I would say if you've got Daza, especially if you are going to tune it, just put sub injectors in it. Go to Audi, buy Audi ones.
Yep.
Don't fuck around. We see so many people and they go out and they bought them off eBay, they bought them off Alibaba or whatever.
They're £100 cheaper.
And they're £100 cheaper because they're fake.
Exactly.
And then these will kill your engine. They will kill your engine.
Get a shot of that. Let's ram that point home again.
That'll kill, because the closed loop control is done as a collective. So it's done as in the collector. Yeah, so they're engine killers. They are engine killers. So I would say, you know, you might sit there and make at stock, you might go, yeah. But as you start to go tuning, I would think about them, especially as mileage starts to mount on a car, because they wipe engines out. And like I said, we don't see so many problems on V10s when they're naturally aspirated, but we have seen problems when they're boosted. Just go to Audi and buy them. Just go to Audi. But there's too much risk from being fake. And the reason the engine can hide a lot of injector problems is because you've got 5 cylinders combusting. So treat them as 5 single cylinder engines, and then the closed loop control is done as a collective. So what you can get is if you've got 1 cylinder running rich or 1 cylinder running lean, completely out of scope, at the collector, it's only got to apply a small percentage trim change up or down to bring the exhaust gases into spec. But you can still have 1 cylinder massively out, if that makes sense, which is why then you start logging them and you see, oh, bloody hell, why are we 8-10% up or 8-10% down? Because you've got 1 cylinder's really unhappy, but the closed loop control is masking it. And because it's within 25% plus or minus on the closed loop trims, you don't get any problems. You won't get any
So the first
won't
you'll
get
know
any
about it
warnings.
is when it goes
Is when it
bad.
goes pop-de-ping.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, step 1. Step 2, torque. Mid-range torque. Engines bend rods at mid-range. Low RPM, high torque. So peak cylinder pressure, basically, because the higher you go in RPM, normally on a dyno, your torque curve falls away, doesn't it? And then what gets your horsepower is your RPMs going up. So if you're going to bend rods on McLarens, bend rods on these, it's always going to be cylinder pressure, and that's always mid-range, so where your peak cylinder pressure is. So again, you can't do it on horsepower rating, because you can have a car make no torque at mid-range and make a shitload of horsepower. Whoever your tuner is needs to know these.
Yeah.
Because if they start asking for too much in the middle, you'll bend rods. As a rule of thumb, 550 to 600 horsepower, you probably need to start thinking of uprating your rods or controlling what's going on spec-wise. These are fucking strong when they run right. So we've done 1,000 horsepower on a stock block. This is our Capricorn block, and this is going in the engine for Ignite. So this is fully linered block by Capricorn. So this is Gucci. So this is what Roberto's spec was.
This is lovely.
Yeah. All right. That is cream of the crop. Doesn't get any better than that, block-wise. That is Gucci. And it is what we call a dry liner conversion. So it doesn't open up into the water galleries. All you do is you machine out the parent bore to take the liner, and it's a press fit liner or dry fit liner.
Yeah.
So there's no water behind the liners. You have got to be careful you don't burst through the parent bore into coolant jacket, which we've had another company, they did a C63 for me years back, Dave's. We built that engine, and it drank coolant like it was going out of fashion, and it turned out they'd buzzed through the parent bore behind the liner, and it was leaking into the block when it was running. And I had to buy him a new block, and then we had Capricorn do that one for us. That's why now Capricorn do. There is another lad as well. He's doing quite a few Spec J. He's doing quite a few as well. So yeah, it's not required unless you're absolutely going to beat the living piss out of it, because the stock block is strong. But again, be careful who you pick to do these, because the liner's in out of sync. So the liner should be proud, only by a certain amount, and then what happens over time, if it's done wrong, is they can sink and they can fall below the deck face. So the black one we done for Chris,
Yeah, yeah.
it was the same, wasn't it? We had to build that one because the liners had sunk in that, which that car is up for sale. Go and check out VGS. 940 horsepower that car is, and the guy's selling it.
Is he?
Yeah, he had it back 3 weeks. He's issued that. I'm going to lose my license.
It is amazing though, the amount of these big power cars we see, and then they're up for sale.
Yeah, so Chris has got that back with him at the minute now, VGS, and that is up for sale. 940 horsepower, built engine. That is baller spec car.
It would be quite nice to have a look at that before it actually goes.
Yeah, we'll
because we
Chris.
never actually finished that off, did we?
It is cheap for what he wants for it. For what he's put into it, not bought it.
What do you reckon? He's close to 100 grand in that.
Oh, God, easy.
Yeah.
With everything that's gone on.
Doesn't even want half of that. No.
So, yeah. They run MLS gaskets, multi-layer steel gaskets. Again, you don't have to really go anywhere. They've got good solid fire rings. They've got double layer fire rings on them as well.
Can we see through there? Yeah.
So that's what bites into the top and bottom gasket. And then you've got good sort of, it's like a rubberized material, but that's the sealing face for the outside then. So it's got that sort of, it's not silicon, but it's like, it's like a silicon sealing face over top and bottom.
Yeah.
So they're extremely good gaskets, and the bolts are very, very good. If you go to stud kits, top or bottom, you are going to have to think about machining. So if you go from a bolt to a stud and you torque it down with a torque plate and measure it all up, they'll be different, and the same with the mains as well. So don't just think I can throw studs in it and make it stronger. You've got to think about what's going on underneath as well.
So just to explain again why you'd go for studs.
So a stud can help with clamping force. So on the McLarens we do it, we put studs in. So basically when you put the screw in, you essentially stretch the threads inside the block. So you move around what's going in the block, and then the clamping force is obviously through the head, but then you take the bolt to to its elasticity, which is why like these are like 60 Newton meters plus 90 degrees, so 180 degrees. When you go to a stud kit, then you don't put stress on the threads so much, as in you're trying to pull the threads out of the block.
Yep.
So there's less stress in the threads, but then you put more stress through the stud by pulling it down on the nut. But what can happen is because you're asking, they have a stretch to them, and say you go to an L19 stud where there is very little stretch, when you start pulling down 80, 90, 100 foot-pounds of torque them, you can rip them out of the block.
Right.
So you've got to be careful with that. So normally you'll see block conversions where they drill the holes out in the heads and they put time certs or thread certs in the block to run a bigger stud. Again, the biggest power ones we've done, mate, have been on stock head bolts.
Okay.
So we don't see heads lifting.
Right. Hang on, can we have that again?
I said, big stud, are you talking about yourself again?
No, I'm a little stud.
There we go. Press stud.
Big stud. Yeah. So again, you haven't got to necessarily throw studs at it to make it strong, but you have got to think about, if you fit studs, the knock-on effects.
Take that into account.
Because they'll pull the mains around and they'll pull the block around different, so you just got to measure it up. Once you've kind of gone beyond that and you start getting to the limitations of a turbo, then your springs become an issue. So you get massive exhaust gas pressure,
Yep.
exhaust back pressure between the back of the exhaust valve and the turbo, because you've obviously still got stock turbo on, and you get valve flow where the spring's not strong enough to pull the valve shut. So that's then when we go to an uprated spring. Which will be stronger. Let me show you this next. So that's a conical spring as well. So you've got less coils but a higher diameter.
Yeah.
Or more diameter to the coil. So that will be more seat pressure, and so basically that would be more force acting on the valve when it's installed and at max lift. So
Yeah.
you've moved your required force or your spring force up. So that's the next thing. Those springs are the same as a Golf GTI, a naturally aspirated V10. They're in everything. They're in everything, mate. And they're shit. They're shit. They're £8 each from Audi, Volkswagen.
Really?
They're junk. Yeah, they're junk. First thing I change. Yeah. They just offer no support. They break all the time.
So they're used in a multitude of engines.
Yeah. It's like and the valves are as well, but the valves are good. But we see so many breakages on these. Pretty much every GT3 engine I take apart, I'll have a broken spring.
Right.
So they don't like RPM. They don't like boost. So when you start upping the power, they float. So yeah, as you then start going beyond the realm of your rods, which is why we tell everybody when we're doing rods and pistons, we then want to put at least valve springs in it. But you'd normally go to a decent valve as well, because the next step after that then is a good turbo.
Yep.
To open up the back pressure and have a more efficient turbo to get your exhaust manifold pressure down. And then other than that, mate, they are strong. So they're 4-bolt mains. So you've got 2 bolts through the bottom, and then these bolts here bolt the side of the cap in.
Yep.
Well, these are the ones out of, so if I show you these are a 6-bolt main. So what is in the RS3 is you've got your 2 bottom bolts, and then you've got your 2 side bolts.
Okay.
So all right, ignore the outer bolts. So these are a 6-bolt main.
Yep.
But the ones in the RS3 are a 4-bolt. So again, it's a really strong bottom end.
Yeah.
I mean, you think we're doing over 1,000 horsepower on some of these.
Yeah.
Have a little 5-pot, so it's 200 horsepower cylinder.
And it's such a narrow unit, isn't it?
Yeah, it's tiny. Yeah, it's a tiny little thing. It is a tiny little thing. So you just have to, when you buy one of these, if you're not going to tune it, do your due diligence. Find a good car that's been well looked after, lots of servicing, because you can see. I mean, this head's trashed, but like the state of the oil in that.
Yeah.
And this was a high performance, this was a high horsepower engine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's no good. It's no good. Got to be changing the oil more than that. If it's that colour, something's wrong. Something's wrong. Either you've got massive blow-by, or you're not changing oil enough.
Yeah.
It can only be one of those two things. But I know this engine had been rebuilt, so that to me says servicing. You can't run these engines because they're essentially race engines. You can't run them at 10,000 miles or every year. You've got to be using a really high quality oil and changing it regular.
And regular, what would you say for this? It
Depends how you're using it.
Yeah.
If you're at pod every weekend.
Yeah.
It's only oil.
It's that critical.
Yeah. If you're on track, again, it depends where your oil temps sit. So after we've done a track day in the R8s, we'd change the oil because while I'm on track, the oil's at 115, 120 degrees.
Yeah.
And time degrades oil, fuel degrades oil, contaminants degrade oil, but heat degrades oil. So if your engine's seeing high temps all the time, every time you drive it, so if you beat on it a lot, you need to replace it.
Yep.
Which is why then we would use something like Motul 300V for track work, because it's used to working at extremely high oil temps. And monitoring what's going on with that as well. But yeah, we don't really see any timing chains issues. The only other things we see is when you fit the cams, they're not like the early TTRS engines. So they're in a module for starters. Yeah. So you can swap the module head to head because the cam bearings are part of the module.
Okay.
So I can take it off this head and I can put it on that head, I can put it on the next head, I can put it on the next head. But getting the cam variators, they have a position onto the ends of cams.
Yep.
It's not like the earliest Seepers or like the V10s where you can put them on and put them in any location.
Yep.
The back of the variator has got 3 holes that has got to line up with those. And if you get them wrong, you get timing faults.
Right.
So we've seen that before. And then also we've seen on the front of the engine here, there's a timing wheel.
Yep.
And essentially that's the position sensor for the high pressure fuel pump.
Okay.
And we've seen problems with those as well, where they've been out of phase.
Yep.
So you just have to make sure you get your timing wheel. Make sure you get your pump drive timed up correctly as well, because that can cause some issues.
Talking of pumps, so water pump, oil pump?
Oil pump we change on every engine build.
Right, okay.
We do an uprated, or we do basically port it, modify the spring inside it.
Yep.
But again, unless you're doing silly power, it's not required. The bolts that hold the bottom end of the engine together, so that hold the sump pan. You might have to go from underneath that.
Yeah, I would have, mate. Yeah.
So the bolts that hold another engine that hold the sump pan on and hold the lower crankcase girdle on are aluminium.
Yep.
So we do a bolt upgrade for those, so we change them to steel. But as a minimum, you've got to replace them
Yep.
when you do the engine. And again, the only other thing we change as well is that's £130, that front timing cover seal.
Wow.
And we use a billet one where you can actually press the crank seal out of the middle of it. So
Okay.
Ayers Motorsport doing, for example. And then like Ayers does a step plate for the sump, so he makes the sump deeper.
Yeah.
So it's a aluminium plate about that long.
That's
about
Hank, isn't it?
Yeah. And it steps the sump down, and then there's a collar that goes on your oil pickup as well. So you can get more oil in the bloody thing.
Cool.
Because they don't run a massive pan. But yeah, just do your homework with them before you buy them. Don't go and just because it's been tuned, check who's tuned it, check who's done the hardware. Because mate, they're money pits. By the time this is done, this is going to cost a guy 20 grand.
Wow. What's the replacement engine for one of these?
I think if you go to Audi and buy an engine, I think they're nearly 20.
Right. And a block is what, 5?
A block is 5. Obviously, he paid a little bit more because he bought this lined block.
Yeah.
But he needed a block ahead. But second-hand engines are 12 to 15. Oof. So
yeah,
you're getting to the point where everybody wants these because they're in Golf Rs now. People are putting them in caddies.
Yeah.
So second-hand engines are very, very expensive.
Yeah.
But if you come and you want, say, rods, pistons, valve train, and an engine refresh, you're probably talking 8 to 10. If I've then got to put a crank in it, it's £4,000. If I've got to put a block in it, it's £4,000.
Yeah.
You know, if it needs a head because it's burnt a valve seat out or burnt the casting out under the valve seat, there's another £3,500. Do you know what I mean, mate?
Soon gets expensive, and I think,
and especially because the majority of issues we see are because of those.
so it's coming back to this again. Let's just get that injector again. Yeah. I think with these kind of cars as well, we all see on YouTube and social media people, like you say, beating on them.
But yeah,
It's one of those cars.
yeah. The more power you want, essentially, the more you have to baby it.
Yeah.
You know, you can have an extremely high performance engine, but it isn't going to sit there and do 100,000 miles for you. It's got a life. They've got a life. That's why when you start getting into proper race engines, they have a life.
Yeah.
They do X kilometers and then they're in bits again. So
I think it's something that we try and get across. I know you try and get across is the fact that if something's tuned, you need to treat it differently.
Baby. Yeah. It's not a daily.
No,
it's not a daily. Especially when you've got these boys who, you know, champagne taste lemonade money, or maybe they don't understand what they need. But 1,000 horsepower, one of these, that's a lot of stress, and there's a lot more going into it than just an engine. Yeah. Like I said, the one Chris built, he's probably spent 100 grand on that car.
Wow.
And he's got hold of it, and he's literally like, this thing's terrifying. I'm going to lose my license.
What about stock turbos with these? Do we?
Yeah, the stock turbos, and even then, when you start going to hybrids, you know, you can make good power on hybrids.
Yeah.
You can probably make more power than what the engine will let you on a stock frame turbo. It's just then when you get into that point where you go, well, I've got to build the engine, then you kind of go, well, while it's out, I'll put a bigger turbo on it and I'll do.
And you're down that rabbit warren. Yeah.
But what people miss is then is you go, right, okay, well, now we need a fuel system. Like when we get into twin turbos, you know, you want to jump up from 1,000 to 1,200 horsepower. It's a lot more money to make that jump because you need all the support around it. You're running everything to the limit. You're on injectors to the limit, fuel pumps to the limit, gearbox clutches to the limit, turbo to the limit, intercoolers to the limit.
Yeah.
So,
well, what about fueling with these? Are we?
Yeah, so they do like there's a couple of companies like Radium and that do good drop-in surge tanks. Yeah. There's a couple of companies that do the external ones. So you do a lift pump upgrade, and then you put a surge tank in the back. Yeah. And then you run, obviously. Operated fuel lines to the front then, so you've got more flow in fuel lines. The DI pumps are really strong, but everyone backs it up with secondaries. So everyone runs big secondary injectors like what we do. You can run them on ethanol. But again, ethanol, flex fuel, that kind of thing, you're asking for trouble with fuel lines. You can't leave the fuel in there overnight and stuff like that.
We touched on that with the Garda, didn't we?
Yeah, or if you can leave it in overnight. You just can't leave it in there for a period of time.
Sure.
You know, you need to be putting it back on pump gas, which is why when we pulled the Lambo to bits, the inside the fuel pumps and fuel tanks were destroyed because it'd obviously been sat in ethanol and it ate everything. But it's good for power.
Yeah. Dan, obviously, do we see poor maps on these as well, where people have
they've had people out there because they're easy to get power out of. People who don't necessarily know what they're doing, or the driveway mappers and stuff like that. So again, there's lots and lots of RS3 forums. Jump on those and find out who's had what done by who. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? There's, you know, EcoTune built the fastest one in Europe. So for me, we built the engine for Roberto's car. They took the record with that engine. You know, Stan knows he's like the back of his hands, but there's obviously other good. I'm not saying that he's the only one out there. Sure. There's lots of good tuners. But what I would say then is if you want someone to build you a car, like say Stan at EcoTune, then follow their recipe. Don't go, oh yeah, well I'll buy this intercooler and I'll buy that turbo off someone else and I'll buy this off someone else. Follow what because they've tested, they know what's what. Yep. Stan owns Berto's car now, that's his. So do you know what I mean? They've got a development mule, they know what works, what doesn't work, what turbo you need, what you need for this. So I would say, you know, if you're going to do that, go to a tuner who can give you the package and look after the whole thing, like what Chris did with that RS3. He did everything, and then little bits were outsourced. Like we built the engine, EcoTune did the software, stuff like that. So, yeah, mate.
So there we go.
We're just starting to see more and more of them, and we're starting to have more and more people talk to us about them, and they're buying headaches. They haven't had them long and have gone bang. He hadn't had this long and it went bang. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So,
be careful.
Be
do your
careful.
research.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then go and have some fun, because they are good.
Oh, they're wicked and they sound
Yeah,
mega.
I love 'em.
They do sound mega.
I do love them.
Yeah. Bit of a talky one, so we'll probably get slagged off for that. But hopefully it's helpful, because like I said, we're starting to see an influx of these now over the last 6-8 months. So
We don't like seeing people with broken
getting
cars.
stitched up, mate.
Yeah.
Getting stitched up. Or having problems, do you know what I mean? So
Signing off?
I think so. I think that's what I was planning to do.
Nothing else to say?
No, bye. Smash buttons, and we'll see you on the next one. Toodles!
Right.
Anything to add, Kate? No?
Nothing to add.
I've covered everything.
Did you? I don't know. I wasn't.
Listening? You never
Say
listen.
bye.
Oh, right, okay. Bye, dear.
Oh, no.
No? What, dear?
Oh, yeah.
There's one worse than that, though.
You
isn't
might be old, but I am not as old as you.
Okay.
I'm not dear. Why, what's wrong?
Hey? Daddy.
No! Oh my God, what's wrong with you?
Do I need to cut
What?
this?
You never let me dress up as Santa
No.
either and sit on my knee, yeah?
Obviously.
No.
I don't have daddy issues.
Damn it.